We are back, guys, with Unveiling Addiction. And today I have a special guest on to speak with you about his journey with the opioid epidemic and where it all began for him and where he's at and how he's navigating it through. We're going to bring on as many people as we possibly can that feel comfortable enough to discuss their journey so that maybe we can bounce ideas off of one another and try to work through this shit together and reverse this shit, really. So Unveiling Addiction is so honored to have our guest Brandon on. Hi, Brandon. How are you
Hey,
doing?
how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you? That's a great background you got going on there. Much better than
Yeah,
mine.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, Brandon, how? Tell us a little bit. How did you come across my content? How did we connect? I know we've been going back and forth a little bit, but just remind me and tell the audience where this started.
I basically found you on TikTok, just kind of scrolling around. I don't really watch TV or nothing like that, so I just scroll TikTok and I just kind of came across your stuff and commented on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And it resonated with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I constantly comment on everything, like I just do. But yeah, it's nice to hear people talking about it because I went from 24 milligrams of Suboxone down to 9. And I'll probably stay at 9 because I have pain issues and stuff. But it was nice to hear somebody, talking about it because most of the time you never really get off of the Suboxone or methadone or whatever maintenance you're on, really.
That's right. That's right. So let's get into that. Let's start with where it all began with you. You know, you had mentioned before we decided to record that you were surrounded by it. So was I. Me and my mother used to doctor hop together. So it's, you're kind of become a product of your environment, right?
Yeah, my stepmom, she kind of came into the picture when I was like 14, 15. She was already like addicted to OCs. And my dad really didn't know. He had like no real knowledge of how opiates or anything like that really worked or just anything about it in general.
Mm.
So people said, she's an addict, don't bring her around. And he just said, oh, you're jealous or whatever, just kind of wrote it off.
Right.
And she was getting money from her work. She would go steal it out of the safe all the time, I guess. And she was coming up with a decent amount of money. So she would buy like 10 or 20 OC80s and she would just give me like, between 2 and 3 every time we bought shit, which was maybe a couple times a week.
So did your dad know that y'all were doing this? And
No, eventually I told him when I was maybe like 19 or 20 and he didn't believe me. He knew something was going on, but he didn't like understand it or know or anything about it. His whole drug thing, he did coke in the 80s and drank a little bit. That's really about it. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah. So he understood it at the potential that he could. So okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious if your dad knew. So that went on for a little
Well,
while.
yeah, that's a whole big thing. Actually, they knew something was going on, but they didn't know like what was going on. Like they thought I was having like an affair with her for a long time or something like that because they couldn't figure it out. Because we would just leave for 2 or 3 hours and come back, and I would split as soon as we got home. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it was just like a weird thing, and they didn't understand it at all. So
My
it,
question to you is, how did your stepmom even bring it up? Like what? Like
well,
what?
when I first met her, really, because my dad had a whole house after my mom left, and it was just me and him. She had like 3 or 4 kids, and my dad was just like, "Oh yeah, you can come in," because he came from a family with a bunch of brothers and sisters and stuff like that. And I think he thought that would be good for me at that young age because of like my parents' divorce and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it was up to me if she could move in with her kids and stuff. They didn't say it like put it flat out like that, but I could kind of see what was going on.
Okay.
So, I was definitely like openly smoking pot and stuff like that. Like I never really hid anything I did. So she saw that and she was like, "Do you like Xanax?" And I said, "Yeah, I like Xanax." I took it like one time. You know what I mean? I was probably about 14 or 15.
Okay. Continue.
So then, she was telling me she was prescribed to like these Vike 10s or whatever. And she would throw me like a couple of those, but she didn't really tell me about the Oxy or whatever. You know what I mean? until I kind of brought it up one day, just talking about somebody that was real knotted out at my buddy's house. And she was like, "Oh, you can get those." And I said, "Yeah, I can get those. They're around. The older kids have them." And, she was like, "Okay, well, I need some and I'll give you a few, and this just kind of went on for a long time until eventually they stopped making the 80s, and you basically had to buy those 30s or you had to buy stamp bags. And I didn't have money and shit, so I eventually started doing stamp bags, and she just continued on with the pills, I think. But this created a rift in the house to where I got kicked out of my house when I was maybe like 19 or whatever. And I ended up going next door to my grandmother's house and kind of living there while she was at the house causing all kinds of shit. And like my dad was just clueless. He's still clueless to this day, but he doesn't. He has a good heart, but he just doesn't understand a lot of it. You know what I mean? He was in over his head. I'll just put it like that.
Yeah. Oh, you seem so heart-centered. So is she still in the mix?
No, I haven't spoke to her since she left. Maybe when I left and whatever to my grandma, she was there for maybe a year after that, and then she eventually left because it was just so much tension and shit, between that two houses and stuff. So
Sure.
she eventually just found a different place to go to and left, and that was that. I
So,
still talk to my one stepsister, but I don't talk to any of the other ones.
oh, okay. Well, I was just curious because so it started there for you, right, with the OxyContin. So how did you get to the Suboxone? So you went to this, you got your stuff off the streets. I did both, right? I mean, if I couldn't get them from my
Yeah,
doctor,
you went to the doctor. I knew a guy. I kind of got like into crime really big, and I eventually just kind of started selling it and doing stuff like that.
yeah,
And I knew, like, back then, like the times that you're talking about, like then that's when people could go to Florida and kind of doctor shop and stuff like that.
yeah,
And I knew people that were like going down there, and it was like, if you get rid of a couple, I'll give you a couple, stuff like that.
that's
Well,
right.
eventually, I was like tired of being sick, and even she was like, "You should go on methadone or Suboxone." Like even people were saying it to my dad and stuff. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So eventually they were like, "Well, if you can take this med and not, be all screwed up, why don't you just take that?" Right. So I did that, and I eventually started taking it, but I was taking like only 1 8 milligram dose a day, and I would like do heroin later in the day. So
Okay.
I could kind of have a dope habit, but not really. Like I could like pull off the illusion of being kind of put together, but not really. You know what I mean?
We're so
So
crazy.
yeah. So I did that for a very long time, and eventually I kind of even, the dope was different than the pills. It definitely was. It was a different world altogether. It really was. So eventually I got kind of tired of that too, and I just started taking my like Suboxone, like mainly taking that, but I didn't feel like I needed 16 milligrams back then. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I would just try to take the 8, and then I would have like an extra 28 a month or whatever. And I actually didn't want to commit crime or nothing like that, so I would just kind of sell the other half of my prescription for a very long time. I
Yeah.
went through a couple, but that's only $280 a month. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I make that more than that in a day landscaping now. You know what I mean?
I know. Listen, when I decided to empty all my Suboxone in a hot, like a boiling hot, like pot of water, I had a few people reach out. Girl, I could have sold those for you, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that no more. I'm done. I'm done with
Well,
it.
you know what I eventually started doing though was I was like, okay, I realistically have to take this medicine, and I can't really do the other shit like the way that I used to, like full time on that, because I did get used to not being sick all the time from taking that stuff in the morning and then playing around and later in the day if I was going to play around. It wasn't every single day, but if I felt like it, I could. It kind of lets you casually do it in a sense, but I could feel my brain getting ripped apart all the time from the two different chemicals fighting in your head. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I eventually ended up starting to take benzos, which my stepmom always gave them to me, and they used to be real cheap back in the day. Well, when they stopped kind of doing like the Florida Oxy thing, the Xanax went away with that. To a degree, it did.
Yeah.
But you could still kind of find. you could still find them around. But basically, what I'm trying to tell you is I eventually just started taking my Suboxone, and I started focusing on the benzos as my little elect habit instead of, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because if I felt like I had benzos mixed with a sub, I didn't care if I did dope. You know what I mean? Because I had the carefree thing. I wasn't sick, whatever. But that ended up causing like a whole big other thing. Just as much time as I spent on opiates and stuff, I spent with like Xanax and benzos too. And
Wow.
because you couldn't get them as easy, and I eventually figured out you could get research chemicals from China and shit, which are basically just like if they're making Xanax, there's like 1,000 other variations of that medicine that they came up with that they had to scrap that weren't good enough to give to the public, but they still had the recipes for. You know what I mean?
Right.
And over there, they would just cook them up so you could get something very similar, like bromazolam or something. And I eventually started taking that, so I had an unlimited supply. I could buy 1,000 milligrams for like $120. And I mean, most of the time, I would basically make the little tincture vial, and I would like get fucked up for a week, and I'd lose it, and I have to keep buying it anyway. You know?
Creative. Listen.
Yeah. Well, basically, I had trauma that I knew I had it, but I knew what worked for me. You know what I mean? Like I was always trying to like kind of just feel okay. And I knew like when you went to the doctor, they always wanted to give you like dumb shit like Lexapro, stuff that was never going to work and just kind of screwed your head up even more than it already was.
Yeah.
But I knew you could get that quick relief from like the benzos, right? But I knew they wouldn't give it to me at the doctor's office. And, you know, so I just kind of figured out that way. But that started a whole other direction in my life of things that ended up happening and stuff just from messing with the benzos. Really, realistically, I think I had more consequences from the benzos than I actually did the heroin and the oxy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I do too. I've got a lot of stories from benzos. So
Yeah, well, I eventually ended up just buying all that shit offline, which that's a whole separate addiction in itself, is being able to just go on the internet and buy whatever the fuck you need. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like picture going on Amazon and that shopping addiction being that, but for your habit.
Right. Yeah. I remember I used to be able to get somas online and they would just mail me like 120 somas.
Yeah, it was just so much easier. You didn't have to deal with street stuff, and it was just a lot easier. So that was a whole part of the thing too that I had to get used to, was just not buying it, because that was a thrill for me too, was just buying it. Really, it was.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. So can I ask you, you had mentioned that you had pain.
Oh
How,
yeah. Well,
how,
this is what happened. COVID happened in 2020, right? And I was fucked up until then. But I
okay.
started to be like, this ain't working. Like, and I started to take my Suboxone like as directed. Like I started taking 16 milligrams a day instead of playing with it and doing stuff like that. And my life started getting better, and I started finding like side work, you know, because everybody was getting COVID checks and stuff.
Right.
So it was real easy to go out and find like, you know, I would just type out like labor, $15 an hour and stuff. Now this did lead to me starting a really good landscaping business. But for the first 2 years, the first year was just hourly stuff. Then the next year I got better with it and I started doing it by estimate. But I was screwing around here and there until 2022, right? Like
Mhm.
I was kind of half in, kind of half out. Well, I thought I was going to party with this chick and we were just going to kind of have some fun or whatever. It
Yeah.
ended up me getting hit by a car because we were all screwed up, and I was really big and cut. Like I was like UFC fighter, like kind of condition at the time, really from all the work I was doing, you know?
Oh wow.
And I don't really remember it because I was all fucked up on benzos, and the lady was like a huge cokehead that was up for like 4 days. Like, you know what I mean? Neither one of us really knew what the hell was going on, I don't think.
Right.
And it basically ended up getting to a point where this chick, and like when I got out of the car, she hit me with her car and drug me like to maybe an eighth of a mile down the road, and there was like this tunnel. and I was on top of the car hanging on to it. You know what I mean? She was going maybe 30 miles an hour or something like that, maybe 30, 40. And then she went down to maybe 30, 25, something like that when she hit this tunnel.
Right.
And her car was starting to come through. So she kind of had a brake check. Now, when she brake checked it, that momentum flung me off the front of the car. It fucked my sternum up, my rib cage, shit like that. But from her initially hitting me from being like 5 foot in front of her with his car, it screwed my knee up real bad too. Now, I was in such good shape at the time. I was able to walk off of this and tell them that I didn't need to go to the hospital, but I was like hurting like that. Like, I mean, I really should have went to the hospital.
Right.
I think I had a concussion at the time, and I thought if I went with them that I was going to like die or something at the hospital. Meanwhile, it was the other way around, realistically. And it was like one of the dumbest things I ever did was not just go to the ambulance, you know?
Right.
So I laid on this couch for like 3 days. And then I eventually went down to the hospital, and they were like, you got to get like surgery. You're a trauma case, all kinds of stuff like that. They couldn't believe that I walked away from like a trauma accident like that. But that was just the kind of shape that I was in from all the work I was doing, you know?
Yeah.
So I did that.
So hold on, let me intervene, Brandon. That was 2020, right?
That was 2022. This is up until that point I screwed around. Now, when that happened, I basically was like, okay, I really can't be doing this. Like, this really got to, like, you can't do it. So there's more to this too, even after that. But basically in 2022, I had to get this big chunk of metal put into my leg so I could walk and stuff like that. Now, it took about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 months just to be able to walk again after that, because I couldn't like walk for a while, you know, I had to like relearn how to do all that shit. So I eventually started walking, and my physical therapy was my landscape projects. Like, I learned to walk again working. Like, I had to. I needed money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was kind of screwed up from PTSD from that too. Like, from all the other stuff I had experienced. But when I got out of the hospital, I needed painkillers in a way that I really needed them. Like, it wasn't like, you know, you can ignore that kind of pain. I had to do what I could do. So I had this girl kind of coming around that would like go get those fentanyl bags or whatever. And I would do that for about a month or two until I felt that I could kind of handle this pain. And just something happened. We seen something out the window, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because it'll just make me sound crazy. But
Not me, I promise. But go ahead. That's fine.
What I seen out that window really traumatized me and made me question reality.
Oh, you're in the right place. Unveiling Addiction.
Yeah, well, I mean, I couldn't sleep in a dark room for a while. I couldn't do that for about a year. I was getting crazy just from not being able to sleep. I had to be in constantly like light-filled rooms and stuff, and it was just real messed up. Like, realistically, we seen this UFO come down, and it got 10 feet away from my window.
Okay.
And it was the most insane thing that ever happened. I had spiritual experiences, and my mom was like a medium and stuff like that. But like, I never experienced anything like that, and I never seen any like her talk about anything like it or whatever. Yeah. So this happens, and it really fucked me up for like a year. So I start looking into like ways to handle PTSD and stuff like that, you know?
Okay.
And I eventually took these mushroom micro doses or whatever, like at the end of the year last year. I didn't take like enough to where you're going to hallucinate or nothing like that. I took like 200 milligrams a day, and it was really helping me out. But like, ketamine therapy really helped me a little bit before this. But the whole point that I'm trying to get to is I think PTSD is actually a spiritual thing. Okay. I don't think it's a mental thing, like, at all, like after this experience, because what actually took it away, because now I don't even feel like I have it. Basically, I got saved, right? Like, God came down and literally pulled all this black shit out of my energy field and replaced it with light. And it was just like a real trippy experience. But the drugs didn't do it. They, like the mushrooms and stuff, they just made me comfortable enough to where I didn't feel like it was like you're in a flight or flight thing constantly. You know what I mean? Because I was so jet. My blood pressure was like 168 standing,
Yeah.
like
I'm
all the time. That was just from all this stuff, you know? And it was getting crazier and crazier. Well, eventually God intervened and did what he did, replaced the thing, and I was saved. And my life changed even more dramatically from that point out, since about the end of December, beginning of January of this year. My life is just, since that part happened, just my life has gotten just better in every imaginable way. Like, it wasn't anything I did. This isn't my strength. This is literally all God's. Like, I'd love to say it's me, but I tried for what, 15, 20 years to manage the way that I wanted to. This isn't anything that I'm doing. God did all this, really.
That's
But
right.
no, I'm
Spirit.
not I'm
Spirit.
not I'm not supposed to be here, and I know that. And I've had a lot of near death experiences and things like that, and every day I wake up is really an extra day that I wouldn't have had before, and I just try to enjoy it to the best of the ability and try to spread love. Really, that was one of the things they said to me, was you're here to spread love. That's what you're here to do.
That's right. I love that. I freaking love that so much. And thank you for sharing that experience. So listen, I don't it's a synchronicity that you're talking to me about that right now, because I had a spiritual awakening. That was around the same time. 2020 was when my whole situation was spiritual. I just, same thing. I can't keep doing this. What am I doing? I'm taking Adderall, I'm taking Xanax, I'm taking Suboxone. Like when I'm tired, I take the Adderall. Whenever I get too wired, I take the Xanax. Like, what
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
doing?
I used to have to smoke crack to stay up from the amount of benzos that I used to took. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
was, yeah. You
yeah,
just kind of play
absolutely.
with your mood.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had a little spiritual experience where I was questioning things. I was questioning my reality. I was having appreciation for life. Like I couldn't kill this bug that went across. Like I usually would step on a bug, you know what I mean? But something in my
Yeah,
body was screaming at me, no. And I'm like, I'm so confused. But it was just like this massive spiritual awakening. Um, and,
right.
and it put me on this journey of like truth. And I find it interesting that you're bringing up what you're bringing up, because I follow a podcast called Journey to Truth, where they cover all things like that. And I just find that very interesting and fascinating that you had that experience. When you saw the craft outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just find that interesting. And I appreciate you sharing that with me, because a lot of people will say it's crazy. No, I think it's crazy that people think it's crazy,
Well,
honestly.
honestly, look, I don't know what the difference is between all the different ones. Like, it seems like there's metal ones and stuff. The ones that I seen were like, I seen light beings before, like kind of walk out of my dad's room when I was younger, but I just was like, I wrote it off. Like, what can you really say? You know what I mean? Like, I was like sick, just up at like 3 a.m., you know? And
Right.
I seen this thing walk out of my dad's room like casually, like it was nothing. And then years later, all this other stuff starts to happen. But the ones that I feel like there's different ones or something. Like there's metal craft ones, and it seems like there's light ones. There's
Okay.
definitely a difference in between them. I don't really know it all like that, but
Yeah.
I know that there's a difference in between them, and I know that the light ones give you love and peace and stuff, and the other ones seem to be not good.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I also have heard that there are sentient crafts too, right?
Well, no, they'll respond. Like I remember, because I was like pretty fucked up when it happened, and I
Right.
thought I was trying to like write it off as being fucked up. I was. So I was like, if you are, because I could feel this pull on my head, like I could feel it, like the closer it got, the more of a pull it kind of felt like in the middle of my head, like on your third eye type deal thing.
Okay.
And I was like, it seemed like it was intelligent and being able to respond in some ways. But I was in my head, I was like, if you can understand me, do a figure eight. And it did it. And
What?
yeah, yeah. And that part, I got real freaked out from that.
Yeah.
But then it got maybe 10 foot away from the back window and it was there for a minute. And then I went back over to the window because just the pulling on my head just felt so tense. I couldn't handle it. You know what I mean? So I had to back away from the window while this girl was just kind of staring out the window, like couldn't take her eyes off it. So when I went back to the window, it just bolted off like at a really wild angle. It lit up the whole backyard just like it was daytime. And it
Yeah.
was just a split second thing. You know what I mean? Just split second.
Oh,
And it just zoomed off, and that was that. So that like screwed me up for like a while. And then
oh,
about maybe a year and a half later or so, like I got fixed from it. God saved me from it. But until he did that, until Jesus Christ saved me from that, it was just driving me more and more crazy and stuff like that. It really was.
okay. Oh, wow. So it was bringing you down.
It was fucking me up like bad. And I
Oh,
swear I seen this big black shadow thing on the corner of the wall while that girl was watching out the window.
yeah.
I think it was maybe like 8, 10 foot tall, something like that. It reached the ceiling. I know that because the room was on a horizontal line. So
Okay.
like the bottom part was maybe 6, 7 foot up or more next. I'm say 8 foot there and 12 foot on the other side. At the beginning of the room that sloped down. So I was like on the side where it was like the tallest going up, and that's kind of where I seen it. And I eventually kind of broke free of whatever was going on, and I went back over to the window, and it just fucking zipped off, and that was that.
Wow.
But yeah, it was like one of the most intense experiences I had ever had, and it really scared me and really freaked me out, like in ways that I can't even, like really kind of get out. But once like God saved me from it and all that and put that light in me and took out all that black shit. I don't know how else to describe it. It just was like dark energy, black shit, and
Incredible.
replaced it with light. And from that point on, everything got easier.
Okay.
And I know that, he's like walking with me all the time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and
So
I started seeing a lot of like Christian memes and stuff pop up out of nowhere and stuff because I wasn't like a Christian when I was younger. Like
okay.
I knew of God and stuff like that, but I was always into like Marilyn Manson and shit like that. You know what I mean? Like real wild shit.
Right.
So like yeah, I didn't have anything in my algorithm pointing to all this stuff that I just started seeing randomly. You know what I mean? So I started seeing all these Christian memes, and my mom was like, "That's the closer you get with God, you'll start seeing things like that." She basically told me that,
Oh,
and that really started my spiritual experience. But I used to think that this was all like mental, and it was just like this thing. And no, a lot of this is spiritual, like a lot of drug addiction and stuff like that. You want to kind of write it off and make up like how atheists kind of tend to do. They'll come up with every scientific reason there can be,
yeah.
but realistically it's a spiritual thing that you can't measure by science realistically.
I love that. Yeah, that's so interesting. You're mentioning that. I couldn't agree with you more. I actually have a friend that she has her own YouTube channel. And she does a lot of things. Her name is Laura Van Tyne, and she does spiritual work. And she had a guy on her show, or she discussed a guy on her show that, he's a doctor. He's very aware of addiction to pain pills. And so he refused the pain pills whenever he had his surgery. But for whatever reason, he was having these cravings for pain pills, and he couldn't understand what that was. And so, and it was becoming overwhelming for him. And so he got with my girlfriend, Laura, and it turns out, he had a soul had attached itself, an addicted soul had attached itself onto that doctor. And that was the cravings that the doctor was feeling. It wasn't the
Was
doctor.
the cravings from that guy.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
believe that some people can pick up on other people's stuff like that, I guess.
Right. Right. So how are you today? How are you functioning? How are you feeling today?
Oh, today it's great. Like I said, since January happened, and just this is a completely different life than I've ever had. Like I'm actually learning how normal people do things and stuff, and it's because like I was always really good at kind of hiding it with the Suboxone and shit like that. Like, yeah, I did dope, but like if you just see me for like an hour, you'd think I had my shit together halfway. You know what I mean? And now I'm like really learning how to do that. Like, like I'm learning how regular people date and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is fucking wild. Like,
Oh, are you in the dating scene? I'm still not ready for that
Well,
one.
no, just I had a really unhealthy relationship with all that. Like, because of what I used to do, I used to just attract like strippers and escorts and shit. Like, they just naturally came to me. You know,
Yeah.
like I never looked for them or nothing. They would just always were around me. I never really gave like money and stuff like that. But you know how it works when you're getting high. You just kind of share your drugs and stuff,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you can't do that. And I've been single for like 2 or 3 years now, and I'm like, how the hell do people actually meet people and have healthy relationships?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's different, man. It is, but you know what? I love it, and it's all a experience, you know.
Any advice on that? You got any advice on how do people meet? Uh,
Honestly, from what I'm finding, like I was real used to just like sleeping with somebody real quick, and then you decide if you like them or not, like 10 minutes after or whatever.
yeah.
And I guess that's not how it's done. I guess you
I don't
gotta
know. Yeah. I mean, I guess
no,
every
well, no, that's just because I had a really wild lifestyle, and a lot of people just ain't like that, and it was just different. But no, the more that you take the time to get to know somebody and do that, the healthier the relationship is ultimately going to end up being.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I couldn't agree with that more. Yeah, that's a realm I'm just, it's been a little while for me in that realm too. I find it so interesting that you and I both kind of had this like awakening around 2020 because I don't know about you, but I've got some crazy stories. I mean, cars flipping, cars on fire, just crazy.
Oh yeah, I get it, dude. Like I used to be the doctor for the trap houses, and I used to keep everybody alive, like when they'd fall out and shit. I
Right.
never lost anybody. Like I never did. When I like was breathing for them, I put some subs underneath them. But this was before Narcan and shit was out. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So yeah, I just throw a sub underneath their tongue and kind of breathe for them and stuff. But no, I had so many wild experiences like that, and a lot of them were near death experiences that I couldn't appreciate until I kind of got to where I'm at now, and I look back on it and I'm like, how the fuck did that even? You know, I'm very grateful it went as okay as it did, but yeah, it's just wild, man. It really is.
you're a survivor, is what you are. Yeah, definitely. You're a survivor. I just think it's interesting, right? Because I had all these crazy experiences that you would think. I mean, my car catching on fire with my son in it, or well, my son was out of it, but he was with me. All these crazy experiences, and I still continue to use. But yet in 2020, here we are, and I'm hearing more and more people like nothing being a catalyst, just waking up and being like, I can't keep doing this. What am I doing? Right. And
Yeah,
it was
it's real wild. It really is. I think there's a lot of people going through that, and probably a lot more. And I think a lot of people, the reason I'm even really sharing it, because I really don't tell that story a lot. Like, I really don't. That's
oh,
probably the most, I've only said that to maybe 2 or 3 people, but I think a lot more people have these types of experiences than they really like said because you feel crazy. You know what I mean?
oh
So
yeah.
I just kind of hope that maybe somebody's like, "Oh, I'm not crazy." Somebody else had like wild experiences like that too, and they got better. You know?
Brandon, you're not crazy. That's exactly that is exactly what I'm talking about. The podcasts of people that I follow, Journey to Truth, they have lots of people on there that have experiences like that questioned and thought they were crazy. And yeah, you're not crazy. You're just having experiences. You're sensitive. You're operating in a frequency that others are not in, and that's a high frequency. I can tell you're a loving being. I can feel it from you. So you
I've
just
actually gotten messages from a lot of people on TikToks trying to like, they'll be like mediums or something trying to give me a reading and shit, and
oh,
I'll say, "I know I'm fine," because I'm
yeah,
afraid to. I'm afraid to like deal with anything like that I'm not supposed to.
of
You
course.
know what I mean? Because you're not supposed to mess with certain things when you're a Christian. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I'll get like messages and I'll be like, I really want to give you a reading. You have like very beautiful energy and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, that's great and all, but I just don't want to do something I'm not supposed to or, do anything like that. So I just kind of say I'm good on all of it. But I hear that from a lot of people. And I've always actually, even when I was getting fucked up all the time, just people naturally kind of gravitated towards me.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely put out a very humbling energy. And anybody wanting to do you a reading, you don't need a reading. You know yourself,
No,
right?
I don't
You know
want to. I
yourself.
really don't. Please don't, text me or DM me like, hey, da, 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 like I'm
Yeah,
not. I'm just gonna ignore it.
I get those too. But anyway, yeah, I get it. So, what's next for you, Brandon? I mean, thank you for coming on and talking about your experience. I mean, do you have anything that you could tell people about that are wanting to come off of Suboxone? Like,
The way that I did it, yeah, that's a great thing. Like I said, for me personally, I have pain that I have to manage, and I do that with a tiny little bit of medical marijuana because I used to take like 400 milligrams a day at one point. Like I had to take that every day. It actually felt like heroin sickness at a point if I didn't take that. So I only take 5 milligrams of that with CBD now if I take it at all, but that helps tremendously with it. And go as slow as you possibly can. Don't rush yourself coming off of it, especially if you took it for years like I did. And like if you took it for over 10 years, you're not going to do a 30-day detox off it. It's just not going to happen. And if you do, you're going to really hurt your mind trying to do it that quick. Like the way that I did it was I cut off I went down 2 milligrams a week, right? And I would cut off like little eighths and stuff like that of my dose. So I would barely notice it. And then actually it was 2 milligrams a month. So by the end of the month, I was 2 milligrams less than what I would be. So I'd go down 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 a week. So by the end of the month, I would be 2 milligrams down. And I didn't really notice much from doing that. There was times where I would get like a little mood swingy and stuff from the higher ones down. But if you keep doing that and you just kind of go down 2 milligrams a month, which some people might say that's slow or they can do it quicker, but you took this for a very long time. You have a lot of that built up in you that kind of has to re-get its homeostasis and stuff in your brain again. It just has to even out. And that's whenever I feel like you hear people that are like, oh, I'm stuck on 2 milligrams or whatever. Because that seems to be where everybody gets stuck is 2 milligrams. Right. And I feel like if you go very, very slowly, I feel like that's the key to being able to just do that. Because if you go down to 2, that's where it seems to be like the cutoff. Right. If you went from 16 and you got down in 2 months or whatever down to 2, yeah, your body never readjusted in that time. It's still, and that's that lowest point where you're going to be able to notice it. So you're going to have a lot harder of a time. But if your body takes the time to do it, like I have a couple friends that took the Sublocade shot and they're off of it. Like if I really was going to come off of it, I would do the Sublocade shot again. I did it once before, but when I took it, I wasn't nowhere near ready to stop doing anything. I was so used to putting a strip underneath my tongue every day. So whenever I didn't have to do that, I started taking bars and crystal and just anything I could because I felt like I had to take something every day.
I know it. Yeah.
Now I don't feel like that. Now it's more like, damn, I have to take this fucking strip and I have to let it dissolve for a half hour. You know what I mean? Right. But I would really do the Sublocade shot, and you can just have them kind of schedule your next dose like an extra week out, 2 weeks out. You can do it like that, and you don't really have any pain at all. My buddy said he sneezed a few times. That's all he went through with it. And like I said, if I was going to do it, like come off it fully, that's the way I would go about it. But I know I'm probably going to have to take this, so I just stay at my 9, you know.
So you don't have any reservations like, okay, so, Purdue Pharma pushed OxyContin, okay? Then, they were handing out like candy. Then they provided us a solution, Suboxone.
I think it's different for everybody. I think some people do need maintenance for the rest of their life, and I think some people don't. Right. I think I'm somewhere between that Claudia lady that advocates for people to get Oxy and you. Like I'm somewhere in the middle there because I do feel like it's like very cruel to not give somebody pain medication that needs it because I have been in that, and all it does is turn people to the street. Because I couldn't get pain meds, I had to go buy fentanyl bags off the street when I got out of the hospital. I had to leave the hospital early because they would only give me Dilaudid tops. You know what I mean? I had to medicate my own pain. So if you're not going to give people what they need to actually kill the pain, that just turns into these fucked up drugs. And now they're doing this xylazine, metatomite bullshit. That's so much worse. Like you don't even have a like time to decide that you don't want to be on it anymore. Like your lifespan's so short on those, you know?
Wow.
But there's that, and I do feel like it's fucked up what they did, because they definitely absolutely did push the oxy and stuff like that. But there is people that genuinely need it. So just because it fell into the hands of it, really, just because some people fucked it up and exploited the system doesn't mean that that should hurt the people that genuinely need it. Like my dad's friend got hit with a wood chipper. He got crushed by it. He didn't go into it, but the machine fell back and it broke every bone in his body. They won't give that man anything at all, period. And that man he realistically will need pain medication for the rest of his life. And I think that's actually a real discussion that needs to be had between people that realistically need the medication, like Oxy and stuff, and people that are literally just abusing it because they just want to get high. There's a big difference in between that.
I understand. Yeah, I totally understand. I actually, I'm a caretaker for my mother, she had a horrible fall 10 years ago, and now she's paralyzed from the waist down. And for the past 10 years, she's been somewhat of a guinea pig to Big Pharma. And they have continued to prescribe her pain medication.
What did they give her like that? Because I saw your post the other day that said she was like kind of doped out or whatever. And you said that she was kind of like the guinea pig. Because knowing how it is in my state, they are so anti everything. People that really need it. My sub doctor had to advocate for me to get pain meds when I had that happen.
I think this is a targeting of sorts. Honestly, I really think this is a targeting of sorts because I've got so many people saying, you know, they had her on like Oxycontin, okay, or oxycodones. They had her on 30s and 20s. They had her on, they had her on that before like a couple of months ago. Then they finally stopped that because she kept overdosing. Because she does deal with pain. The pain that she deals with, she fell 60 feet over a balcony. Okay. She has shattered vertebrae. She does deal with pain. And so when you give her the pain pills, though, sometimes the pain so much, she just keeps on and on and on. And we're dealing with overdoses, right?
You know what? When I was in the hospital, I was like, I stayed for the amount of time I did until the pain got tolerable to where I felt like even the way I had to manage it. Because when I first got out of surgery, I was like, I am very grateful that I'm in a hospital right now. Because if I wasn't, I could very easily see myself doing so much just trying to kill this pain. It was so intense that you could overdose really easy in that kind of pain. Right. But, you know, like I said, there's just people that need it. And there is going to be people that are just addicted. Like it's just going to happen. They're in so much pain. They have to be addicted because the alternative, they're so miserable. They can't live. There is a difference between that and somebody that's completely able-bodied and is just like, you know, like when I was a teenager, it was just, you know, doing it to get high. There's a difference between someone like that and, you know, like my dad's friend. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, totally. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's good. That's why I'm trying to build this platform, right? To bring all perspectives. No one's right. No one's right. No one's wrong. We're all just trying to navigate this thing together. And, you know, maybe
I just want to say one thing. Just because I said that, I am not giving anybody the okay to go out and like do dope or fentanyl. That's between you and your doctor, what they figure out. That's know, like you can't really say, oh, well, I am just going to be like that. Because I thought I was going to be on it, and I ended up being like, oh, well, I could actually lower my dose to 9 milligrams. You know what I mean? Right. You kind of just have to figure that out with your doctor. But I am not, you know, saying go out and do a bunch of dope and shit because you're in pain. You got to thug it out a little bit. But I'm just saying, realistically, what they're doing with that oxy and taking it away from people that need it, I think that's kind of messed up. But it's a very fine line, like a very, very fine line.
Yeah.
And I'm nowhere near equipped enough to tell you who is and who isn't. That's for the doctors to figure out. You know what I mean?
Or yourself, you know, we got to take our power back. But yeah, thank you for saying that, Brandon. I'm so glad that you came on and talked today. So I think the message here for sure at the end, we're going to wrap this up, is this is a process. This is not coming off of opiates. If you decide you are ready and you are willing and ready, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
This realistically for me, it took about even 2 years from 2020 when I had that car thing. It's been 2 years and I'm still going. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? You're not going to just decide you want to stop and be done, in a month. It's just not going to work like that.
that's
It's
right.
a long process. And you're going to have to go through it. It's a journey. As long as you spent trying to do all that shit, it's going to take at least half of that time, if not longer than the time you spent devoting to it to get better from it.
That's right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody else is going to appreciate it too whenever we post this up. Um, Thank you for coming on today and speaking your truth. I'm trying to get as many people as I can to be able to speak their truth. And don't go anywhere. Please stay on Unveiling Addiction. Help me inspire others. I love your
Oh
energy.
yeah, I found your thing and it's real interesting. Like I said, there's really not a lot of groups. My sub doctor gave me a couple Facebook groups so I could go on for people that have been on it long term and stuff like that and just kind of deal with it. And that was the only group that I had ever really found about people on it that were actually just kind of talking about their day to day thing on the subs. And like I said, for me, I know me personally, I'm gonna be on it for a very long time. So
Yeah.
it's just cool to find people. And if I do decide that I can handle the pain and come off it, then I at least have some kind of a community to kind of lean on. Because I never liked AA and NA like that. I never could do that. I couldn't, but it's cool to be able to find something that's not like this stringent rule thing and accepts all these different ways and views and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Hey, good, good. We'll make our own over here on Unveiling Addiction. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll make our own rules. There are no rules. Okay.
No, there is no rules to it. That always drove me so crazy when you'd hear those old alcoholics telling you if you did it, you didn't do it the exact way they did it, you're doing it wrong. And it's like everybody's different. Everybody is a unique individual case, and you can't just say because I have so much problems with A and I could go on about it, but I know you're trying to wrap it up, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I listen. I'm there with you, and I couldn't agree more. I know it's helped people, but it's just not something that's ever resonated or worked for me. So, and that's okay. That's totally okay.
Yeah, some people it does work for. It just I applied a lot of it because I spent 2 years in rehabs throughout my life.
Oh,
Like throughout, like when I was all fucked up on heroin and shit, my family just kept sending me to rehab to get me out of the house and stuff, And at times I was on probation, I basically spent that time in rehab. So
yeah.
whenever I started being like, I really don't want to do this anymore, it was a lot easier for me to apply the things that did apply to me that I learned in rehab and just what I could figure out and take my maintenance. And you know what I mean? There is some good stuff in there. There absolutely is.
Yeah.
It's just not all of it,
Right. You take what resonates and leave the rest. I love
Yeah.
it. You're very intuitive. I can sense that. Like you're just intuitive, for you to be able to manage your own, your wean and all that. Like just some people.
Oh, hon, I've detoxed myself off benzo so many times, I can't even tell you. I could tell you exactly how to taper from any fucking variation of benzos because I did it so many times. You know what I mean? And I didn't know that was I thought everybody could do that. You know what I mean? Like I really thought everybody just kind of knew how to do that. I spent hours and hours looking it up, and I was like my own guinea pig. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But
Brandon,
yeah.
well, I have a lady that's trying to do exactly that. And I told her I don't really have experience with benzos. Where I would start was just start dosing down very small, so maybe I can connect you two and maybe you can help her.
Yeah, I could definitely tell her how to. It's very small, and like it's just as long as the long acting substances, they're a whole different ball game than tapering somebody off of like dope back in the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's completely different, and it's going to be a very long taper to really get off. But you got to go down by the smallest little amounts, so you don't really notice it. If you notice that you're getting sick, like if you can tell, oh, I have too much anxiety, you're going down by too much, even if it's only down by 0.5 at a time. You know what I mean? Like let's say you're taking 3 milligrams of alprazolam and you go down 2.5. If you start to feel extra anxiety and you're anxious, you're doing it too fast.
Okay. Well, I'm going to connect her with you because I popped Xanax all the time, but for whatever reason, I didn't have to wean myself down off of that. I just
I'm so sensitive to it now. If I took one bar from it, because like I took it so many times in taper and I took all these different kinds, If I took a bar of even regular regular pharmacy Xanax, I would actually be sick from it just because my body wants it so much once it gets a taste of it.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so like that never really goes away. If you take benzos a lot and you stop, you really can't screw around with them like at all. Like once it's done, it's done.
Yeah, be careful. I'm glad you said that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, do you have anything else that you want to say to the audience today? I mean, what's one thing that you'd like to say to everyone today?
I hope that everybody just remembers to love each other. Realistically, that's what we're here to do. And just don't judge each other because you really don't know what the other person's going through, really, at the end of the day. And this is a long process. This is not something you're just going to grasp in a month. So even if you've been clean for 2 years and you start preaching, that doesn't mean that you're right just because you got those 2 years in.
Freaking right. I love that. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on today and telling us your journey. We're going to post this here shortly. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.